ceasefire between Hamas and Israel is underway in Gaza, but Israel says it reserves the right to restart the war if necessary. Pro-Palestine rallies take place in capitals across Europe as the clock ticks down to the start of the Gaza ceasefire. Protesters in Kyiv demand more information from the Ukrainian government about the location of their missing loved ones. Donald Trump arrives in Washington ahead of Monday's inauguration as organizers scramble to move the event indoors. A ceasefire between Hamas and Israel, which started on Sunday morning, appears to be holding. The deal was agreed by Israel's cabinet in a late-night session which stretched into the early hours of Saturday morning. It comes after months of negotiations between the warring sides and mediators Qatar, Egypt and the US. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said on Saturday that Israel is treating the ceasefire as temporary and reserves the right to return to war if necessary. 33 hostages held by Hamas are to be released in the first 6-week phase in exchange for Palestinians being held in Israeli prisons. IDF forces will also move away from densely populated areas, allowing thousands of displaced Palestinians to return to what remains of their homes. Phase 2 is expected to see the remaining hostages released and a full Israeli troop withdrawal from Gaza. Phase 3 will see the bodies of the remaining captives handed over to Israel in return for a reconstruction plan for Gaza. There have been rallies in major European capitals in support of the Gaza ceasefire, which comes into effect on Sunday morning. Many European protesters hope the ceasefire, which Israel maintains as temporary, will lead to a lasting peace. Families of hostages held in Gaza gathered in Paris with French officials and Jewish groups. 33 hostages are set to be released over the next 6 weeks in exchange for hundreds of Palestinians imprisoned by Israel. Activists marched through Madrid in support of Palestine hours before the ceasefire is due to go into effect. While some protesters held banners saying fair peace, others called for Spain's government to boycott Israel. Several thousand people marched across Lisbon to protest against all wars and to call for peace. The protest was organised by trade unions and civil society groups. And in London, thousands of protesters held a static rally in Whitehall after police curtailed their plans for a march. Thousands of people have attended a rally in Kyiv to demand the Ukrainian government do more to secure the release of prisoners of war held in Russia. They're also demanding authorities step up efforts to locate missing loved ones. There have been semi-regular protests in Ukraine to demand answers about the whereabouts of family members missing in the war. Protesters have expressed their frustration over what they say is the government's poor communication and lack of clarity. Russia and Ukraine have carried out intermittent prisoner of war exchanges since the earliest days of the war, the last of which took place in December. Meanwhile, at least 3 people were killed in a Russian missile and drone strike on Kyiv in the early hours of Saturday morning. The city's military administration said 3 people were injured in the attack. The statement said the Air Force shot down 2 missiles and 24 drones. A water supply pipeline was also damaged and a metro station was closed. US President-elect Donald Trump has arrived in Washington, D.C. ahead of his second inauguration on Monday. His flight from Florida was dubbed Special Air Mission 47, a nod to Trump becoming the 47th president. He arrived in Washington as organizers of the inauguration were scrambling to move events indoors due to freezing weather. That includes the swearing in of the president and vice president that traditionally takes place on the steps of the Capitol. Before Trump arrived in D.C., groups of protesters took to the street to march for women's rights, which they believe are under threat from the incoming administration. The People's March promoted themes related to feminism, racial justice, anti-militarization, and other issues. Women outraged over Trump's 2016 presidential win organized large rallies throughout the country. The Washington rally attracted over 500,000 people, making it one of the biggest marches in U.S. history.